IVM.
Hi and welcome to Know Your Kanun. This is Amber from AM Rana Ventures, and today on my show I have someone very special. It's a millennial for a change today on the show. A young gentleman by the name of Shantanu, who's an student with Ashoka University and a very close friend and like a brother to me. So it's in fact amazing to have bright minds. Just to give a small update, Shantanu is also a creative content writer, if I might use the term correctly. And he's also been coding some apps, down in Pune for various purposes. So Shantanu, just please briefly introduce yourself. Maybe I'm not the right guy to introduce you properly in a casual way. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Amber. Thanks so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
So a little bit about myself. So I just recently graduated. I finished my 3-year degree at Ashoka University. I majored in economics.
Yeah.
And I plan on finishing my minors in computer science and in environmental studies in this upcoming year. Little bit about myself. As you said, I did briefly for a while. The app was running. I worked with Bharat Forge to sort of create an app in which basically we could tell the time in which a railway crossing would be shut or not, so people can plan their commute accordingly.
Right.
And of course, for some logistical reasons that couldn't continue with that. But yeah.
Perfect. So, today I have Shantanu on the show because there's a very, very interesting point which he's been making. And this is, I think, the thought process of millennials in the country is about environment protection in India and how, as a subject, we have not been able to really grasp whether it is environment protection. And we have very blatant environment protection in India. Though Supreme Court, the Apex Court has laid down various guidelines, but ultimately it's not the law that really stops you. It's the sensitization towards it. And Shantanu had a very interesting take. And that's why I wanted to get a young voice on the show who can probably just enlighten us with this whole era of how environment protection is looked at. So Shantanu, we'll start with the first very interesting point which we spoke about was EIA bill. So can you tell me the full form of EIA first for all the listeners and what the bill is all about?
Right, absolutely. So the EIA stands for the Environmental Impact Assessment.
Right.
And in its essence, what it is basically before it's sort of the assessment of all the environmental consequences of a plan or a policy or any program before it's actually undertaken.
Right.
And one of the main reasons why this does exist is, of course, for the environment itself, but it's also sort of to serve as a bridge between the local people who say if it's a forest, and the people who rely on that forest as a resource or who live around it, their voices can be heard through this act. And they can be like, okay, they can raise whatever concerns that they may have. So that was so that's of course one of the aspects of it.
Yeah.
So so recently there was a EIA 2020, the draft, which has been making.
So no, I'd like to stop you there and say that basically the bill is just a mode of acquisition of lands and maybe reimburse those individuals a part of it to.
Correct.
A mechanism to basically take your lands or whatever for development purposes or I would say for building of construction of dams, energy solutions, etc., right? Yeah. And then what was the recent fuss about, right, on the show? Like to talk about that. I also heard the parliamentary debate before the bill was being introduced. I think in 2006 was the first time when we made some mention about it. And then into 2020, it's again come up in a different way.
Yeah, it's being amended. Yeah. So the 2020 is, I think, I think it's a draft as of right now.
Right.
And it is building on 2006. And there are actually some very drastic changes that have been made.
Right.
In the 2020 draft. So basically, some of the main ones are it's a lot easier for companies to sort of construct and build. Like, so for example, like the number of restrictions that used to be there before have severely been cut down. And even the number of permissions they need. So earlier, what they need to do is before they could clear any land,
right,
they have to take the permission and they'd have to use this EIA and just get a few different approvals for it. But now they're allowed to basically clear the land, and before
right,
they start building, then they can get the approval.
Right.
And that's of course half the damage done.
Right.
And some of the rules have also been made less stringent. And another very important change is that the industries basically polluting industries specifically, or industries in general, are allowed to build closer to like reserves, which are like say the national parks and the biosphere reserves
Right.
around, which is quite shocking because that would certainly be like a detriment to their quality.
Right. So for all my listeners out there, the this bill came into picture earlier in 1994, if I'm not wrong, and the idea of the bill initially was after the Bhopal gas tragedy that happened. It was to ensure some
Yeah.
compliances, and in the way such a harmful industry, I mean, to operate again, there have to, there were some amendments which were to be made, and in lieu of that, this came out. And when this came out again in 96, in 94, in 2006, it came up again in 2020. There are certain red flags, as we highlighted, and those red flags are in terms of governmental powers which are overreaching in terms of acquisitions that need to be made. Generally, the delay happens on part of the clearances that one needs when such a project is being pushed, which is related to construction of a dam or so forth, so on. So also, I think a lot of activists, Shantanu, if I'm not wrong, have been saying that there is a lot. I mean, in terms of policy drafting, the rules say that earlier there was a public consultation that used to happen before a
Correct.
certain point was, or a piece of
It's
land
30
was
days,
taken.
now it's 20.
Yeah. So that
Mm.
public consultation is no longer there. They're reducing the time period for public consultation, right? So, I mean,
Right.
how does that affect? Just can you talk like a minute on it? Like maybe just tell our listeners that.
Yeah,
how
sure,
the
sure.
major-
So, right. So, so before this draft, the public consultation was about 30 days,
Right.
and so this 30 days was basically used for like the local people to sort of bring up their concerns, share their concerns, and
Right.
sort of maybe reach some sort of consensus. Even though 30 days may seem like a lot, it's actually much, much tougher um, to sort of get these things done, because oftentimes there's a language barrier, in the sense like things need to be
Yeah, of
translated,
course.
which takes up a lot of time. And you could also, in fact, argue that even 30 days was nowhere near enough
Right.
before, and
Right.
and now reducing it to 20 days is just sort of further worsening things.
Rushing it.
And especially since like the land valuations themselves, like the local people don't really know how to value their land, right? In
Right.
terms of like monetarily, they can't put a price on it, because literally their entire livelihoods depend on it, like in most cases. So this monetary acquisition, or whatever the price is put, is often put by the people who themselves are going to exploit
So,
the land.
what
And-
you're trying to say here is that basically that even for all the listeners, that the law has a gap, and the gap is the acquisition. And since there are a lot of indigenous communities, tribes, and different tribal culture around the country, it's very difficult to actually explain this to them. First of all, in terms of what the vernacular, whatever the reading is, and also in terms of livelihood, because most of people would think that it's very easy to get the land assessed by talking to the local tehsildar or the in charge land revenue in charge, who would just value it as per the circle rate and declare the price. But for people who are losing not just the piece of land but livelihood also, there is no monetary measure to discuss. Though there are guidelines how to measure the loss of livelihood, right? But we are talking entirely in a sense where it's a lifelong thing that the individual ends up losing, and traditional practices which they might be following.
Absolutely.
So there is a stop loss gap there, right?
Yeah, yeah, Amber, you're absolutely right, in the sense that so the land valuation, that's of course one. Of course, it's one of the many different aspects of it. But yeah, how do you value something where you literally depend on your entire livelihood for you? It's not only just a means of sustenance for you. Basically, grown up over there, so it's very, very hard for them specifically to put a monetary term on it. And so that's actually just one of the different problems. So I'd also like to clarify that even with the 30-day window before, it's not like it was in 30 days. It was very, very efficient. There were definitely a lot of hiccups within that time frame too. But they've effectively cut it down to by like 10 days, which is a lot, and it's just going to further worsen things.
Well, that's I think the law has been the main aspects of law of checks and balances is not in place the way it should be, right? So now we also spoke about earlier in the day, we were talking and discussing environment, and when I heard your view on a very interesting view, though, dams are considered to be rather a development activity, right? In India or elsewhere in the world, wherever there are dams, there is always progress in that area. And and dams have always been a good source of energy to, let's say, I mean, for that matter of fact, if I may say, Pune gets majority of its waters from a lot of dams, and
That's correct.
and that too in the British era, which were built, whether it's Mulshi, if I'm not wrong, Mulshi Dam or Khadakwasla Dam, and so many other such dams that are around Pune, and these reservoirs are still supporting the bodies because we don't have enough infrastructure currently to support ourselves. So how can we see that dams actually question the concept of clean source of energy, and from a law perspective as well?
Yeah, right, absolutely. So, Amber, one sort of quote I like to use for this entire dams provide clean energy is when Winston Churchill said, history is always written by the winners. And of course, here in this case, we've all grown up being told like, oh, dams are clean source. There's no pollution. It's hydropower. It's clean. Provides irrigation. It provides water, and all of these various good things, which are in fact true. But if you actually dig a little bit below the surface, dams are extremely like the social cost of dams is extremely high. Right. So there are many different aspects to this. So one is the displacement, like the number of people in the local areas who rely on, like in that area where the dam is to be built, they need to be relocated. Right. Then on top of that, if you think about it, so one other aspect is the drying of estuaries of dams. Right. So estuaries are basically where like the rivers meet the sea or the ocean, and estuaries are a very important breeding ground for a variety of species of fish because it provides the right amount of salinity. It's not as saline in the ocean, and there aren't enough predators and stuff as there may be in the river. So it's a very safe breeding space. Right. But with the water all being held upstream, like these end up drying up, and of course there's a massive loss of marine life, and this can also further be reflected through in the fisheries. Fishermen aren't able to catch their like a normal amount, and yet another way to think about it is say mangrove trees. So now this, of course, mangrove trees only grow in like coastal areas and along river banks. And now the reason why mangrove trees are so important and they need to be preserved is because in their roots they store and they preserve a lot of carbon. Right. And if by chance these trees were to die, all this carbon is just released right back into the atmosphere, and that of course it becomes carbon dioxide, oxidizes, and it causes a shocking amount of damage.
Is that the reason why in Bombay we have the so-called khadi term is there, right? The bay where these mangroves are there in so many numbers, right? And when you entering Bombay from Pune and all, you would have seen when we cross that main flyover, there is a huge bay there, and then there are crazy mangroves around that area and around Andheri, I would say. And these mangroves, due to pollution, I think have not actually fulfilled the purpose they were meant for. Because West Bengal, if you look at, I've been to, I'm forgetting the name of the delta, the Brahmaputra Delta, where you have in Sundarbans the biggest mangroves present in India, and it's a very viable source for fish to be there. If they die down, and that's why we're protecting them, it causes major marine life, and loss of life. Also, on dams, I feel, what could be the alternate solution if we wouldn't want a dam? I mean, just in case, that's also a line of thought that can come to someone who would say, hey, if I don't have a dam, what do I do in India? How do I support, my supplies to the cities? So these are some questions that do come out of this argument on clean source of energy, right?
Right. No. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Amber. So the thing is, like dams are, of course, an extremely important source, but they aren't as clean as we may think. And so as to the point of what can we do? Yep. So this is of course a much larger question, but I think we're headed towards a point where it's now becoming more and more dire that we need to start investing in renewable sources of energy. Okay. And that would be of course solar energy, wind energy, and versus say building dams. Now see, dams are built for many different reasons. Like they can also be there to stop
waterways,
stop floods.
Yeah,
absolutely. So there certainly are many advantages of dams, and there are also certainly many disadvantages.
Yeah.
But one thing that should be sort of addressed is, like, as with anything, there are costs and then there are benefits.
Right.
But specifically with dams, and of course there are other examples as well. But I feel with dams, like, the social costs are paid by one faction of society, and the benefits are reaped by others.
Totally.
So, like, the social costs are of course paid by, like, the fisheries and the local people who've been displaced, and the benefits are reaped by everybody who sort of benefits from the electricity.
Absolutely.
Right. So there needs to be some sort of equalization there, where there needs to be like, the costs should not just be borne by this one faction of by this one set of people, right? They should be little, or even if they do have to, they should be fairly compensated, and more steps should be taken to sort of ensure this.
Right. No, so I agree with you, and that's one of the major causes. Don't you think there should be a law in effect to that? Let's say the EIA again is a very that's acquisition, right? So I mean, it's basically a tool to acquire these lands or so-called areas to make their lives easier for infrastructural setbacks or issues that India is facing. Also, I feel to a larger extent that factories which cause pollution, right? There are so many factories, tanneries in Kanpur, in Agra, and across the country that where you see great violation of environmental laws. Now, as an environmentalist, as a young budding environmentalist or a enthusiast, if I may use the term, or someone who's vouching the cause, don't you think that the energy problems in India, right, which are many, and this is due to red tapeism or due to bureaucracy or name it, anybody, starts from, let's say, self first instead of going to the government, right? What would you say with regards to these energy problems in India, and how can we tackle that? Right, you are an environmentalist. You think of it from all perspectives. Now, what is your strong viewpoint where a balance can be created?
So there are many different facets to that, but one general overwhelming thing that I feel everybody can contribute to is demand, and what I mean is basically purchasing and buying certain items. So, as you said, like the tanneries, all over India, or like so. The reason why they exist is because there's obviously demand for it, right? There's a market for that. People want to buy their products, or a form of their products, a form of their finished products.
Right.
So I think, look, it's definitely going to be a tough question, like a tough ask, but we need to start looking for more sustainable alternatives, alternatives that don't pollute, alternatives that are cleaner, better in the long run.
Right.
And that are more sustainable.
Right.
But so there's also, you can also sort of flip the coin and say, like, hey, there's so many thousands and lakhs of people sort of depend on this source for the employment as well, right? So this is not an easy question to answer. But like, look, we're like the like environmental pollution at the end of the day, it is going to affect all of us, and we do need to start taking change right now. And and I think consumer demand is a very, very crucial aspect. Just try to be a little more aware of what you buy and where you buy it from. I think that's a very important thing.
I think again, conflicting views from my side, but I do agree that demand supply definitely yes, because that's how the country works, and you'll have to look at that. Now, I like to come, so as far as energy problems in India are concerned, you're saying that there has to be a balance, right? But let me take you through some facets of energy problems in India. There are energy problems in, let's say, rural parts of India, where power is still an issue, electricity, where coal is an issue, right? Coal wood burning is stopped, but that coal is still an issue. What are your views on that? Let's say coal. I mean, coal is such a big renewable source of energy that not renewable, I would rather say such source of energy that we are using so blatantly in India, and it's been exploited. And that's a major pollutant. Rather than dams, I would say it's the coal which is causing such huge, such loss to us. I mean, it's air pollution. It's causing diseases to humans. So what is your take on that?
Right. Yeah. So there's going to be a time where you have to call it a day, I think. So the problem of coal in India. So there are a few different angles to look at this from. So the coal produced in India is firstly of very, very poor quality, like the GCV, which is the gross calorific value of coal in India is extremely low. And what that means is there are like the coal that's there, it's very, very smoky in the sense like every time we burn it, it's a very inefficient source of fuel. So the amount of heat generated, the amount of steam, whatever is produced, is not as much, but the smoke that's produced is proportionally much higher versus say if you take like a more finished version of coal, which is say anthracite. And on top of that, to sort of compound this almost, is like the coal factories in India, that process the coal, they're extremely old, they're extremely outdated.
Right.
And this definitely adds a lot more to the inefficiencies that are part of this. And I can actually even go further and say that so like only about 40% of India is connected to the grid, like the electricity grid. And the electricity grid is primarily supplied by coal.
Right.
And I actually think there's a really big opportunity here for us to sort of get rural India, like not specifically onto the grid, but we can sort of support them and provide them energy through renewable sources.
Right.
Like if you can sort of set up some sort of solar farms or wind farms and areas that are feasible to supply these people, it's sort of like a dual. It's like a win-win, right? I mean, you don't need to sort of connect them to the grid while also supplying them with a source of clean energy. And while we're talking about the rural population of India, it's actually pretty surprising to know that the rural population actually consumes as much energy as the urban population. And this was actually a pretty big shock to me when I found out. And it's not because, like, of course, the rural population outnumber the urban
population.
It's because
the mode of consumption.
I mean, correct. I mean, yes, that is a factor. But another very big factor is the kind of fuel that they use.
Okay.
Right. So the kind of fuel that they use is, say, to cook a meal. Like if they want to say cook dinner, what would they do is they'd gather firewood from like maybe a forest nearby, and they just burn it. And basically, this firewood or cow dung, they are very, very inefficient sources of fuel. And what I mean by inefficient is, like, they will of course get the job done, but the amount you need is extremely, extremely high. Like you need, and on top of that, it's extremely, extremely polluting as well.
Right.
So another big step I feel that should be taken is to provide these people with an alternative solution. Like maybe if we give them, say, LPG cylinders.
Right.
Like, of course, LPG is also polluting, but it's nowhere near as polluting as, say, just openly burning firewood. And it's also better for their health because, like, the fumes that are coming from there, they're the people who are sort of breathing them.
And that's the one which causes majorly loss, right? Whether it's health or otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. It certainly does contribute to this. And also, like, say, something like solar cookers, right? They are an even further step than, like, an even better step than providing them with LPGs because it's a completely renewable source of energy.
Right.
And, like, yeah, it's not at all polluting.
But don't you think solar cookers have turned out to be inefficient in India?
So I wouldn't really say inefficient in the sense, like, I mean, yes, so solar energy is not as effective as, say, LPG in the sense, like, it takes a lot of time to cook.
Right.
Like what you may cook rice in 30, 45 minutes, an hour max on your pressure cooker by gas.
Agreed.
Solar energy will, solar cookers will definitely take more time.
Right.
And, but yeah, of course, it's not exactly perfect, but I think it's like a sort of a small cost to be paid for, like, the overall benefit
of
that can be tapped into.
Why I asked you this was, since you're into this, my reason for asking you this is, I mean, when we were growing up, there was a lot of talk about solar cookers and I have seen and used one. Right. And at that time in India, in the early 90s and 80s, early 80s, I would say it turned out to be really inefficient. Right. I mean, we had these old form of cookers where there was a huge box. You would keep these 4 rounded things in those boxes and then try to make it work by keeping on top of your roof or wherever it was. But don't you think for poor people, is it difficult to source such a thing?
So Amber, I actually argue against what you said. So in the
Right.
sense is, so like the alternative here for,
But what are you
say,
recommending? That the government provides these facilities, because there are certain people we know, right, in villages where they cannot afford this, or not even villages,
yeah,
even
no,
for that matter of
absolutely.
fact.
So there would certainly need to be like a decent amount of subsidization for
Right.
solar cookers. I
Right.
definitely agree. And about your earlier point,
Right.
so like the choice here is, say, in like say, take for example a standard urban family is you use a pressure cooker where
Right.
of course you cook your food much faster,
Right.
or you use this which is slower, more inefficient. But the
Okay.
equation for say the for say rural people is much more different, right? For them, if they need to go collect firewood, they need to light the
Right.
fire, they have
Right.
to of course breathe in the fumes. And
Right.
if you give them an alternative that's like, okay, you know what, just put it, like leave it outside in the sun from like say 11
So,
to 3 and you'll have
yeah.
food cooked. You won't need to put in that effort of going and cutting firewood
Right.
every single day,
Right.
right? And like that's the key, right? Because this is food, and they're going to have to do this every single day. And if you give them that option, I feel like that's far better uh, than uh, than what it was before. It's definitely a parity improvement.
Okay. So I mean, major step in by the government on this, but I think as far as legally providing subsidies or going into that detail, those are then I think deeper topics where uh,
Yeah.
it'll be a different ball game altogether. Now I'll come to another point we discussed, which was regarding the future of energy in India and where do we see it. This was about what we can do in alternative. But what is the future of energy in India apart from this as we speak? I mean, I would say contribution from the society. And what do you see in terms of consumption of resources and violation of law? Because there has to be accountability on violation of environmental laws, and that starts even with deforestation. Right? We've only spoken about that,
Right.
but these dams cause a huge amount of deforestation in certain areas. Streams is one of the things. Loss of wildlife, right? Which is, I mean, fish is one of the aspects, but what about other creatures who source their, or other animals who source their daily livelihood from these rivers? Then you have a deforestation that happens that leads to, you see these leopards coming
Right.
into cities these days, and totally attacking people. Where do they go? Because forests are being cut down due to development activity. Now, accountability for that, this is one part of it. Now I'll come to the fact where there are certain factories, etc., which have come up, such as ones producing very dangerous chemicals, right? And they have taken these permissions, and these chemical producing factories can cause damage. And we saw that recently in Vizag, where there was a huge loss of
Correct.
life due to a leakage of a gas or whatever that happened. But it was a dangerous situation, right? But there is no accountability. I mean, in India, there is no accountability of case of laws. And as an environmentalist, what do you feel should be
Right.
the next step to regulate these companies? What do you feel from your side? You're pretty young in the field, but I'm sure you have a take on this.
Right, Amber. No, you're absolutely right. There certainly needs to be more accountability, but it's going to be really hard. There's going to have to be a massive culture shift
Right.
that's going to need to happen for
Right.
this to sort of take place. And I
Right.
think the biggest reason is there's just not enough incentive, to sort of make the switch,
All right.
because unfortunately in India we don't really think like environmental damage is really that serious.
I agree with you.
Like I'm sure if you just ask even one of your friends, and they just be like, yeah, okay, you know what? So what is happening? It's really not made out to be how serious it is.
Sensitization is a major issue between us.
Yeah. No. Yes. Absolutely. And so in order to curb this, I mean, look, it's of course going to be harder and harder to sort of change people's minds overnight, but like just keep sharing stuff on social media, keep reading up, because this is a problem that's definitely going to come, and it's
And
very it's
teaching the
much
same in
sooner.
schools. Teaching the same in schools and
Absolutely.
colleges.
Right. Yeah, definitely. There definitely needs to be more awareness about it in schools, colleges, and
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
and yeah.
No, so I mean, and on the point of future of energy in India, what is your take on
Right.
that? I mean, this
Right. So
has to be about alternatives. What alternative then? So
correct.
what is the future of energy
Right.
in
So coal is is certainly not going to
the
last us
future?
forever.
Right.
there's going to be a time where I call peak coal, where basically the amount of coal that we've sort of that we are finding and is in our reserves
Right.
is going to sort of be less than the amount of coal that we're consuming. And
Right.
basically, it's an inverted U-shaped graph, right? Like the
Right.
amount that we're finding versus we're consuming. And
Right.
once we've just to sort of think of it as if we found all the coal that's there in India,
Right.
um, like, and we keep consuming it at the same amount, and it's growing with every passing year.
Right.
Like we are just going to run out of options, and this
Fair
is
enough.
this is coming very very soon. And I think if I'm not wrong, I think Germany hit peak coal a few years ago, and they've made a massive shift to renewable energies. So
Right.
what is the alternative here? So at a macro level, start investing more in renewable source of energy. Renewable source of energies have never ever been as cheap as they are today. And the
Okay.
more and more we invest in them, the more and more like just the entire market. Like if 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 the renewable source of energy, if that market as a whole is doing better, that in itself is incentive for more and more people to sort of enter that
Absolutely.
market.
Absolutely.
And as sort of the competition grows, it'll keep getting cheaper and cheaper, which is in a sense very very healthy for the environment. And unfortunately, right now there's not much of this that's
That is
happening.
happening. Yes, absolutely.
But I think this is what we need to do.
So you think the future of energy in India? I'm going to talk now from a perspective that how do you power the industries then? I mean, there are so many industries in India. I mean, and still we're not the largest manufacturers. But what do you suggest for these guys? The alternative source. I mean, let's say if we shift from coal, you're saying there are so many things, but then there is thermal energy, there's nuclear energy, there are so many other alternatives, but they also have repercussions. So it has to
Yeah,
start at the grassroots level. Then I think it has to start with the people first. That in case if we
yeah,
want to continue using the coal, we need to first start conserving it by being ourselves mindful that we don't waste it on small little activities. Because I see people in cities using cars for everything, right?
right. Yeah,
Yeah, and whether it's just a
uh,
1 minute walk or a 2 minute walk, but they still use a car.
yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And about the question of what's going to sort of power our industries. Well, I can tell you what's not going to power industries, and that's going to be coal.
Right.
And this is all the more reason why we do need to invest in renewable source of energy. And yes, it is going to be expensive. Yes, there are going to be hurdles. The only difference is, I feel, with renewable source of energy is like the upfront cost is so much higher. People are like, oh my God, we have to pay so much, so inefficient. Versus coal, oh, we get so much more for so little. But the damage that's being done will only really be seen in the next few years. And I mean, even if you look at it right now, there's so much damage. Like, if you say maybe a few decades ago, you didn't need air purifiers in Delhi and Gurgaon, right? But
Absolutely.
now it's like a norm. Like almost every house has an air purifier.
Yes, absolutely.
And like smog has just become so standard. Like you just see people walking out with masks. Like, yeah, it's fine. And this is just one sort of glimpse into the future of, if we don't stop right now, this is going to become the norm, and it's going to get much worse than just waking up with smog or just having to buy air purifiers. And of course, I'm talking about the fraction of society that can afford air purifiers. What about everybody else who can't? Like the amount of people who started getting lung cancer has just drastically improved so much, by 200-300% in just like the past few years. And what can be done for them, right? So this is a problem that we need to face as a society. And again, like any solution, it's not going to be easy. It's going to take a while, but I think it's something that has to be done sooner rather than later, because there's just going to be one turning point where we really can't look back, and it's just going to keep getting worse and worse from there.
So on the last note, before we conclude, I would like to take your point as a millennial that what if you were given that power, let's say in terms of policy and regulation, would be one such policy in law that you would make which can bring the justice that we are seeking here? Maybe if you can just summarize in certain words or maybe sentences or just a small 2 minute talk on the same. What would be your take as an environmentalist on the same?
So it's a little hard to sort of have one law that sort of fixes all
No,
of
but
this.
let's say
But one thing that
yeah.
sorry?
I said
Yeah,
one of
so one thing that I try to sort of make it a norm is, say, of course, just stop the entire plastic bag industry. Actually, we have been making a good amount of progress here. Completely stop buying plastic, switch to cloth bags, switch to cloth everything. Just stop and like don't consume plastic as much as possible. And this even means things like, say, if you want to buy, say, takeout, or like want to buy ramen, like, you get those cup noodles, right?
Yeah.
Try to avoid that as much as possible, because all that waste is going somewhere. And just because we don't see where that somewhere is.
No. So my point was, as a lawmaker, what would you do? Right, these are incentives you're talking from people.
Right, correct. Okay, so as a lawmaker, I think one thing I'd do is I'd make LEDs mandatory for across the country. Like, I'd not have anything. Not. I'm not sure what the alternatives are, but whatever the hybrid and whatever we use prior to that, I'd completely ban them, because even though LEDs are certainly more expensive upfront,
right,
in the long run, not only do they last much longer, but they are so energy efficient,
right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you just think about it, like, everything, like all across the urban areas, we're all powered, like we all need light bulbs, right? We all need light, once the sun sets. And if you can have everybody change to LEDs, like, the amount of power that we'd save is huge. And there are so many, like, LED is just one example, but there's so many small changes that you can do at like a micro level that will make the difference.
So a law which bans and says that use completely LEDs is what you're suggesting, right? Because
maybe
because you know what, government is giving a lot of subsidies on LEDs. There are a lot of subsidies on LEDs currently, but yet because they're expensive, as you're saying, people would not do it. What I think as a lawyer I would do is I would hold the firms more accountable, the compliance standards, the pollution checks, and I would rather have committees in place like the National Green Tribunal, the NGT, which is there. Hold more bodies more accountable. The pollution boards, which are there, more accountable, because they provide data to the government on basis of which these regulations happen. So there has to be a law where accountability and check. Conservation, yes, on our side, yes, but the main thing, drum rolling from the law also, would be accountability, and laws which make these flagrant violations more accountable is what I think us as Indians should look at. And specifically, I would say water pollution. If you look at sea, the sea around Bombay, I don't know how many kilometers the fishermen have to go in to fetch fish, but there is everything dead across in, let's say, 2 or 3 kilometers of the economic zone or of the coastal zone that we have, because there's so much of pollution. People partying on those boats throw crap inside. That's stopped to a limit, but there's still so much that I see. Similarly, companies which are throwing their waste without proper treatment into lakes, into rivers, into ponds, etc., is causing a huge damage. And though they say it's been treated, but there is no mechanism to check it. Check out Ganga, for that matter of fact, in terms of pollution. There are bodies, but they don't regulate the treatment in that ways. Yamuna in Delhi, for that matter of fact, is a living example. There are so many checks in place, but yet people tend to violate it. The point is accountability. Okay, change comes from within for sure, but I think an accountability perspective in the law needs to be strengthened.
Absolutely.
And action on this has to be there.
Disincentivize these activities.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, just tax them, or maybe remove the subsidies.
Right.
I think that is, I think that from a lawmaker's perspective, like, if you sort of heavily increase the tax, you remove the subsidies, or even conversely, like, say, for solar cookers, you just give them a huge amount of subsidies that make people want to buy it. I think laws like that, which sort of promote this sustainable living, I'd say, I think that is what we need. That's the need of the hour.
All right, Shantanu, thank you so much for being here. Though today's session was more not on legal, but I did want to voice out how millennials think. And closing message you want to put out?
Once again, thanks a lot for having me. I'd in fact say as a closing message that for your listeners who do maybe say donate to charity or whatever, I'd say consider donating solar cookers. So there's this entire program called International Aid for Africa, where every time you donate, solar cookers are sort of donated to them, and this would also be contributing to the larger cause of reducing pollution.
And what about India then? Where can we contribute in India?
Of course, there's a similar one for India, and International Aid for India.
Yeah, all right. So that should work. Right. So all the listeners out there, this was Shantanu on the show. Thank you so much for being there, Shantanu. I just wanted to hear your viewpoint, and I think if the millennials start thinking in this way, I think we can bring a change about in the law. And my suggestion would be that, think environment as your friend. Start with the smallest of the things, whether it's a leaf or I would say a piece of grass that you tramp upon. Start from that, and just as small about as not spitting in public, not throwing the stuff out of the window, managing your plastic pretty well, and also start protesting for such causes, because for generations to come, it's going to cause you the loss. All right, Shantanu, thank you so much for being on the show. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much, Amber. Pleasure being here.
Thank you for listening to Know Your Kanun. Catch Know Your Kanun on the IVM website or the app or anywhere you get your podcast from.
I hope you enjoyed that show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money. Some really fun guests on the network this week. Cyrus welcomed Dia Mirza to come and have a conversation about all kinds of different things. Danny Morrison was on Edges and Sledges, the cricket podcast. If you haven't heard that, that's always a fun listen. And Rahul Subramanian was on Football Shitball to grow their ever more exciting list of guests. And it's not just that. Mantra Mugh, the old friend of ours, was on Advertising is Dead. Manu Pillai was on the Filter Coffee podcast. It's been one great guest after the other. And with that, we hope to catch you again next week.
Entertainment is like food for the brain. It's a window to culture and a great way to understand the world around us. The internet has changed what it means to be an entertainer, creating new storytellers with millions of fans. It has spawned a new breed, the story sellers, those behind the scenes creating the business for this ecosystem. They work with brands, platforms and channels who are keen to capitalize on an audience hungrier than ever for more stories. I'm Vineet Kanabar, and I have a ringside view to how stories are told and sold. On my show, I bring you creators, artists, executives, and marketers for a freewheeling conversation around the business of entertainment. Tune in to Storytellers and Story Sellers for personal stories, analysis, and criticism every Thursdays as I talk to the brightest minds telling or selling great stories today.